You know, the one time that I ever tried an open relationship type dynamic or polyamory type dynamic, it was like 5 years ago now, and it was like one of the most chaotic and annoying experiences I have had in my entire life. Now, I was dating three different girls at once, and they were all dating their own people and whatnot. But I came away from that thinking, I am never doing this again. Like, this is just way too much to keep up with. All of the various dramas and inner workings and interpersonal details of each person. It it's enough to keep up with when it's one. If it's three, like even just two, like it's way too much. It is way, way too much. And so 5 years ago, I came away from that experience thinking, this is definitely not for me. And ever since, I have been monogamous. Unfortunately, I've made the mistake of cheating, but that's not really the same thing. And, thankfully, I only did that once. But, I've been monogamous since then. And, in particular with my current partner, I consistently get the sense that they're all I need, and if I were to have anything more than just her, it isn't just that, like, in my past relationships, I thought it was overwhelming, or it was too much, or it was too much to keep up with. It's like, it would feel like it's wrong if I were with more than one person when I'm with her, because being with her, it feels like she literally completes me. It's like everything I could ever want is right there. So why would I seek any alternative? Why would I even suggest having any alternative? And if there are, any areas where she has faults, I don't know why I say if, everybody has faults, or areas where we don't, completely see eye to eye on, or, we aren't entirely compatible, even though we are very compatible. I think part of why the relationship is strong, and also part of how you strengthen a relationship in the first place, is a willingness to compromise in the face of those things and to adapt to them. Because putting in that effort, which is, only really going to work if there's effort from both sides, it draws you closer to your partner. It creates a dynamic where, because both of you are developing as people, both of you are growing as people in a certain direction for one another, it strengthens the bond that you have. And I see her and I think about her, and the only thing I want is to strengthen that bond. I feel like the thing that really makes a relationship special, in particular this relationship, but just in general, is the exclusivity of it. I don't think that that's wrong or that that's controlling, as, many of my trans friends who happen to be polyamorous tend to suggest. They tend to make these kind of arguments to me. I don't think it is those things, because it's a mutual contract. Both of you had agreed to it, and therefore it's consensual. And I think because it's a limit or a restraint that both of you have agreed to, it creates a dynamic that is ultimately going to be special, that forces you to adapt and forces you to become a better person, so that you're able to have strength in this bond. I find that extremely special. Yeah. I'm at 5 minutes. I'm trying to think of more things to say. Like, it's quite a simple topic, I think. Like, it's been the subject of debate, with me and a lot of my trans friends in particular. I don't know what it is with trans women and being polyamorous. I feel like that's a thing that I constantly see. They tend to have these really, like, abstract, convoluted arguments in favor of the practice. And it's like, I'm a live and let live type of person. If that's how you want to live, or if that's what's working for you, go on ahead. But um, they always have like such long-winded arguments in favor of it, and advocating for it, that it just kind of makes my head spin. Because to me, it really is a matter of personal preference. You know, some people find it more special. Some people find it more engaging. Some people like the effort put in. When both parties consent to this social contract, this dynamic. Um, yeah, I also, I mean, like, since I was a kid, I've always wanted a traditional marriage. I think that's something that um, I, for a long time now, have been seeking and looking for, where, I always really idealized all of those couples that I would meet growing up in my, rural town in Tennessee. I mean, I lived in the woods. You'd have to go a ways to get into town, but um, in the very rural area I grew up in, my mom would talk to these parents or these couples, and they would be people she knew when she was growing up, or people whose families she knew when she was growing up. And so many times I met people who started dating in middle school or high school, and they were in their 50s or 60s or 70s now, and they were still together. They were married, and they got married when they were 19, 20, or 21. And those people always seem so happy to me. Not like happiness that's just on the surface, that they're, playing up because people are around. You could tell in how they treated each other and how they lived, in the lives that they had lived up to that point, that they, really truly loved each other, one union under God. And that, the strength of that connection, I think it's something that a lot of us have forgotten exists, or have forgotten can exist, in this very atomized, alienated modern society that we live in. But I think those communal bonds are very much something we can still find. I think the reason why traditional marriage was more prominent back in the day in these small communities, aside from, it being more encouraged, I think it was due to the simple fact that when you grow up in a small community, you're much more likely to share interests with everybody in that community, or have big enough similarities in personality and shared culture and so forth, that you can strike a strong dynamic that continues to flourish as both of you change as people, because the fundamental things about you are compatible, such that whatever iteration of yourself you may become in the future, you're always, on a certain trajectory. Like, the two of you are developing in about the same direction, because you share that lineage, you share that common makeup, that compatibility, and you continue to be compatible throughout, whatever growth, is made. And I've always really idealized and dreamed of a dynamic like that. I think, I may think that traditions in and of themselves don't have inherent value, but I think certain traditions are extremely valuable. And while the institutions, such as marriage or the church, have been historically used to oppress certain people, like women, I think nowadays we live in democratic societies. We've progressed to a point where that isn't the case anymore, and where I think people can, in a more consensual manner, engage in traditional relationships and have traditional marriage. The flip side of this thing that I I really idealize and like the idea of is, of course, long in the past, there were, heinous crimes committed against women because of the institutional power that traditional marriage gave men. Of course, I think that's bad. However, that was certainly not all cases, and that was definitely not the cases that I observed in my hometown. And so, of course, I think more options should be available to people, and more freedom is always going to be better than less freedom. But I think, many of us are forgetting the value or the utility of more traditional dynamics. And so that's why I very much want a traditional marriage in the future. And also, I think I'm sort of getting ahead of myself. What else was I going to say? Oh yeah. I think internet communities in a weird way resemble old small communities in rural America. What exactly do I mean by that? I very much consider myself a citizen of the internet than I do a citizen of the United States. I consider myself a citizen of the world than I do any particular country, even though in certain respects I am very American. I relate more to internet people than I do my own people, more often than not. And those people just happen to be from all around the world. Like, my girlfriend, for example, is Canadian. Most of my best friends are from Europe or Canada, especially the UK. Also, over there in Australia. A lot of my best friends are from those places that are very far away from me. And I tend to relate to those people far, far more than I relate to the people in my own country. And when I look at the servers or online communities that we've established, it seems almost as though it resembles those small communities of time old. And I have to think, like, maybe small internet communities of very like-minded individuals are recreating that dynamic where you have a bunch of people who are on a similar trajectory, who are going to know each other for years and years and years, because regardless of how much they change or in what directions they change, it's a similar direction nonetheless. And so that common ground, those shared interests and those compatible traits, continue to evolve with one another. It's just that they evolve over this common ground that's shared in the wired, in the internet space. And you were able to connect in the first place because you shared common culture, that common culture being, being online and the various trappings and microcosms of which come with it, and whatever community you might reside in, which of course comes with its own unique language. I mean, when we talk about regional differences in a given country and in different communities, we start talking about the little words that people use, the phrases, the way that they talk. But when I look at the communities that I reside in online, some of us might spell certain words different. I might spell realize with a Z, and my friend over there spells it with an S. But ultimately, like, we're going to share common ground over the fact that we're posting, memes of a similar format, that we're referencing these like really, really niche subjects, these really niche in-jokes that have developed over a long period of time. So much so that, like, when I was on the train, for example, with No Thank You, and the two of us were talking out loud, we were referencing like such obscure historical events in like a jokey way, applied to contexts that no other people besides maybe our friends would apply to those contexts. You really have to listen to the conversation to know what I'm talking about. Like there was at one point, he said, You know that guy you were telling me about, Ross Perot? I'm like butchering this conversation, by the way. Who wanted, all of the citizens to vote on whatever subjects he put forth, and he said, if I were in the Ross Perot voting machine, I would vote for Osaka to go to Vermont, and like. This is just such a weird way of talking. And I know for a fact, to all of the British people on that train who were listening to me, this Yank, and this strange Londoner man talking to each other, it's like it would be like we were speaking a different language, a different dialect, because we have all of these in jokes and all of these eccentricities and things that are specific to our communities. And this simply does not translate very well to people who are not in the know, just like the languages of those small communities did not. And it makes me think that in this modern climate, small niche internet communities of very like-minded, tightly knit individuals are recreating those dynamics that existed in those small communities that allowed for things like traditional marriage to flourish. And it makes me think that, as atomizing or alienating as the internet can be on mass society, on, relatively normal people, the prevalence of social media, for example, has been detrimental in many regards. Cultivating your own relationship to the internet, carving out your own niche communities of these like-minded people, can actually serve to recreate a lot of those communal bonds that we thought we were completely severed from in modern mass society. That you can actually simulate the experience of being in those small rural communities simply by finding other like-minded internet weirdos and carving out your own place, forging your own destiny. And in that sense, the internet is the antidote for alienation as much as it is the cause of alienation. And that goes to show that it really is a neutral force. It can be a force for good or a force for bad. It depends entirely on how it's being used. And we can focus on all of the detrimental effects and how it takes away from these small communities and so forth. But on the other side of the coin, it could be the catalyst to create new communities under new paradigms that look very similar to those old ones and allow for things like traditional marriage to take root again. And all of this is to say that I have someone that I intend on getting in a traditional marriage with, who knows very well of that fact. And I'm confident in doing so. One, because I have taken that leap of faith, and I have taken it upon myself to accept all of the potential consequences, but to, much like a belief in God, believe that all will go well, and to put, from deep in my heart, my very best effort forth to ensure that all will go well. I've taken that leap of faith to believe in me and her, and that's part of why I made that decision. We made that decision to invest in the idea of a traditional marriage in the future, something I wholeheartedly believe in, without an inch of skepticism, because I've chosen to take that leap of faith. You can never know for sure, but you can choose to believe with your whole heart. And I think, this started out as a video about monogamy, but really what it's about is jumping into something with your whole heart, really giving it your all. And part of all of this is exclusivity, tightly knit communities, staying together, growing together, getting closer to one another. All of this is a result of the heart, going in with your whole heart, taking that leap of faith and giving it your all. And that core fundamental value and that desire to make good upon it, it all comes from from that. And in a strange roundabout way, that's why I'm monogamous.